Okay, so the headlines will tell you who won, but the real story, the how, it's all in the data. Today, we're going way beyond the victory speeches to really deconstruct the 2025 New York City mayoral election. We're going to dive deep into the exit polls to understand the voters, the issues, and the fault lines that just redefine this city's politics. So let's get right into the numbers.
All right, first things first, the bottom line. After a really long, pretty contentious race, Zoran Mamdani has been elected the next mayor of New York City. The outcome itself is decisive, but the numbers behind that outcome, wow. They tell a fascinating story about a city in the middle of a major transition.
So, let's just start with the final tally. Here's exactly how the numbers broke down.
As you can see, Zohran Mamdani secured a clear majority, pulling in 50.4% of the vote. That's a definitive win, not just squeaking by. Andrew Cuomo, running as an independent, put up a really formidable fight with 41.6%, while the Republican, Curtis Slua, finished a very distant third with just over 7%. That almost 9-point margin of victory from Mamdani, that's significant. But see, that's just the what. To really understand this election, we have to look at the who and the why. And for that, we've got to turn to the exit polls, which give us this incredibly detailed portrait of the electorate.
So let's start by breaking down the winning coalition. How exactly did Zoran Mamdani build a majority in a city as incredibly diverse as New York? Well, the data reveals some really sharp demographic divides.
First off, there was a massive generational gap. I mean, look at this. Mamdani absolutely dominated among younger voters, taking a whopping 69% of those aged 18 to 44. At the same time, Cuomo captured a majority of voters 45 and older. This wasn't just a slight political preference, it was a city fundamentally divided by age.
And the divisions don't stop there. Education was another key dividing line. Mamdani won a solid 57% of college graduates. Cuomo, on the other hand, was the go-to candidate for voters without a college degree. You can already see two very different bases of support emerging here.
So when you put all these pieces together, the full picture of Mamdani's coalition really snaps into focus. He won big with renters, capturing nearly 60% of their vote. He was the choice for 85% of self-identified socialists, and, get this, an incredible 82% of people who've lived in New York for 10 years or less. He also won a majority of non-white voters and first-time mayoral voters. The picture is crystal clear. Mamdani's victory was powered by a newer, more diverse, and more progressive New York.
Now, to get the full story, we need to look at the other side of the ledger. Who made up that 41.6% of New Yorkers who voted for Andrew Cuomo? His coalition was, in a lot of ways, the mirror image of Mamdani's.
So while Mamdani dominated with the young, Cuomo's base was anchored by the city's oldest residents. He won 56% of voters aged 65 and over. That's a full 20-point margin in that demographic. This just highlights how powerful that generational divide really was in this race.
Cuomo also won a majority of homeowners, voters born right here in New York City, and self-described moderates. He performed very strongly with Catholic and Jewish voters, securing solid majorities with both groups. So his coalition was more established, more moderate, and you could say more rooted in the city's long-term identity. So we've seen who voted for each candidate. Now for the crucial question, why? What issues were really on voters' minds, and what qualities were they looking for in a leader?
This is incredibly telling. When voters were asked to name the single most important issue facing the city, one answer dominated all others: the cost of living. At 56%, it was more than double the next biggest concern, which was crime at 22%. This was, first and foremost, an election about economics and affordability.
And here, this is where the race was truly won and lost. Mamdani decisively won the voters who cared most about the cost of living, with a massive 66 to 29% advantage. But for that 22% of voters who prioritized crime, the story was the complete opposite. Cuomo won them by an even larger margin, 67% to 18%. The two top issues created two completely separate electorates.
You know, the central tension of this election wasn't just about the issues, but about what voters wanted in a leader. This gets to the very heart of the choice New Yorkers were facing.
Just look at the two qualities that mattered most to voters. For the 27% who wanted a mayor who would bring needed change, Mamdani was their candidate, winning 77% of them. But for the 22% who prioritized having the right experience, Cuomo was almost the only choice, winning an astronomical 93% of that group. This was the fundamental conflict: change versus experience.
So what does all of this data tell us when we put it all together?
It reveals a city with some deep and profound political fault lines.
Ultimately, this election wasn't just Democrat versus Independent. It was a contest between two very different New Yorks. On one side, you had Mamdani's coalition, younger, college-educated renters who prioritized change above all else. And on the other, Cuomo's coalition, older homeowners, many without a college degree, who valued experience.
You know, these exit polls don't just explain the past, they really frame the future. This election revealed a city clearly and sharply divided along generational, economic, and philosophical lines. So the ultimate question raised by all this data isn't really about who won, but about what comes next. The next mayor's biggest challenge won't be about policy or budgets, it'll be figuring out how to govern a city that is, in so many ways, two.